Morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting today. I declare the meeting open at 9:53 a.m. I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and we're joined by people from other lands around the state. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia. I respect elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Clause 42A of the DAP Regulations. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce the members that will be participating in the meeting today. My name is Dale Page. I'm the presiding member today. To my left in the room with me, we have Clayton Hyam, who is Deputy Presiding Member. Online, we have Jackie German, Specialist Member. We're also joined by Councillor Tyrell Gardner, our local government DAP member for the Shire of Dardanup, Councillor Anne Ryan, our local government DAP member for the City of Busselton, and Councillor Kate Cox, local government DAP member for the City of Busselton. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Stacey Gillespie from the Shire of Dardanup, Councillor Ellen Lilly from the Shire of Dardanup, and Councillor Annette Webster from the Shire of Dardanup. Members on leave of absence, there are nil. And noting of minutes, all minutes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving on then to part 2 or part B of the agenda, which relates to the Shire of Dardanup. Item 1, declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation in part B of the agenda and the related information that was uploaded to the DAP website, noting that an R13 direction response for further information was published on the 10th of February 2025 and an R13 direction response for alternate recommendations was published on 12th of February 2025. Members, could I please confirm by a show of hands that all members have considered all information? Thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. I received 2 declarations for today's meeting. Councillor Ellen Lilly from the Shire of Dardanup has disclosed an impartiality interest in item 3.1. Given Councillor Lilly is a member of the Dardanup Environmental Action Group, she also lives close to the development site. Given Councillor Lilly's stated interest in item 3.1, she was not approved to participate in today's meeting. Councillor Tyrell Gardner from the Shire of Dardanup has also declared an impartiality interest in item 3.1, given he has participated in a previous council meeting at which the item was considered. Under section 2.12 of the DAP Code of Conduct, Councillor Gardner understands and acknowledges that he is not bound by any previous decisions or resolutions of the Shire of Dardanup and undertakes to exercise independent judgment in relation to the matters before him. Given this, Councillor Gardner has been approved to participate and vote on item 3.1 today. Do any other members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this item? All right. We will move on then to item 3, which deals with Form 1 DAP applications. And item 3.1 relates to Lot 2 Banksia Road, Crooked Brook, capping of Tronox Cell 1, DAP number 24/02807. We have some presenters with us today on this item. Presenters, I remind you, in accordance with Clause 482 of the DAP Standing Orders 2024, presentations are limited to 3 minutes. We have read all the written documentation provided for the application, so you're encouraged to speak only on the main aspects you want to get across within your designated 3-minute time frame. Our first presenter is Jenny Trigwell from the Dardanup Environmental Action Group, who is speaking in favour of the recommendation for refusal of the application. Jenny, welcome and over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for letting me speak today. Our attached submissions they indicate our level of concern with this capping operation. And particularly Dr. Leon Munro, who's an international tailings expert, and he's made clear his concerns regarding the decommissioning of the cell and the lack of upfront testing. From our community point of view, the nuisance dust from the site has been an issue for many years, and of particular concern is the location of this tailings cell within the site and the proposal to install the first stage of the covering by June 25. The strongest southeast morning winds happen during March, April, May. Sticky tailings can attach to work clothes, boots, equipment, tyres, etc. These will dry off and fall off as an extremely fine, mildly radioactive dust around the site for the katabatic winds to then carry across nearby farms and the Dardanup town site. These same winds also carry noise from machinery operation and movement. We suggest capping activities are only undertaken during the afternoons after this wind has abated, and a fully enclosed washdown area is utilised to keep equipment clean at all times. Whilst we support the RAR's recommendation on stormwater and leachate management, we believe it understates the issues, particularly during the capping phase, when the cap loading on the tailings will be compressing these tailings and expressing water out both through the leachate system and via the surface. There's little detail regarding revegetation on the cap and so far a track record of failure. Will the area be permanently reticulated during the summer until full plant establishment? Importantly, who will be responsible for removal of self-seeded, deep-rooted trees which will damage the top and the bottom liners? This will need to be vigilantly done on a permanent basis and not just the post-closure management period. Long-term management of cap and embankment erosion due to wind, rain and animal activity is a serious and unresolved risk. Enduring physical and financial responsibility and oversight needs to be determined now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Are there any questions of this presenter? Councillor Gardner, I'll start with you. Do you have questions of Jenny Treadwell? Sorry, we can't hear you, Councillor.
Still missing. Gotcha this time. Good morning all, and thanks Jenny for that presentation. Noting your concerns, you've mentioned the name of an expert in tailings. Could you give me that name again, please?
Dr. Leon Munro. He's from NGO Chem.
And he is a well-regarded expert on this.
Absolutely, and he consults all over the world.
Yep. Thanks for that, Jenny.
Any other questions, Councillor Gardner? Any other questions from panel members? Jackie, do you have any questions of this presenter?
No, thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. I also do not have any questions from you at this time. We did read your submission, which was very comprehensive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Julius Skinner from Thompson Gear. He is in the room with us today, and Julius will be speaking against the recommendation for refusal in the RA. I understand we also have Kylie Shaw from Harley Dykstra and Andrew Doyle, Jamie Wills and John Mulholland from Cleanaway to support Mr. Skinner and to assist in answering any questions from panel members. Julius, over to you. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Just in terms of the approach to the presentations, I'll briefly comment on the material that we've already submitted, and mention Ms. Shaw, Jamie Wills, Andrew Doyle are all available online to address any queries. I will probably make some very brief comments on the material that's been submitted by the DEAG, and I'd also like to comment on the alternative recommendations for referral and approval that were published late yesterday. Mr. Mulholland may have some extra comments in relation to some of those issues as well. As a result, I'm probably going to go over 3 minutes, but the others, as light of that, probably there'll be very little involvement from them. So if there can be a bit of an indulgence there, and then certainly we will finish in total well within the time that's been allocated to the group of us.
Right, so let me just clarify, have we allocated 3 minutes for each of these presenters or 3 minutes to Mr. Skinner? 3 minutes to each presenter. 3 minutes to each one. All right. So have we got a total then of 12 minutes?
It will be less than that, I would expect.
All right. We will give you your time. You can start now, and I'm sure there will be questions, so some of the information can be dealt with that way too.
So just before going to the written material, which is you've already received and gone through, we want to emphasise that the proposed development does not involve any new use or any change of use. It's solely for the physical works associated with the capping of an approved, existing and completed landfill cell. It involves 2 stages. The first stage is essentially just an earth cap over the existing cell, which Cleanaway wishes to commence as soon as possible in order to complete that before winter. That uses existing fill on site and incorporates stormwater and dust management. That then gets left essentially for 12 to 18 months and monitored to allow for settlement, and then followed by stage 2, which is the final cap, which includes geosynthetic layers and additional earth fill, landscaping, rehabilitation, etc., and further stormwater and ongoing monitoring and management. The only reasons given in the RAR for recommending refusal are based on assertions as to a lack of information in the application related to 3 specific matters. There's dust management, leachate management, and stormwater management. And that is in turn sort of said to be based on a peer review of the information that was submitted with the application for development approval. That peer review was sought by the Shire. Our written material considers each of those assertions by reference to the actual content of the peer review report and the information that was actually provided with the application. And without repeating what's in that written material, it's simply the case that these assertions in the RAR are not correct. And a number of instances, particular comments from the peer review report appear to have been taken out of context. To the extent that there are some specific details of management and monitoring measures, particularly with respect to the period after the stage 2 works, those things are referred to in the RAR as missing. These are details that for this type of work, in respect, are typically and in some instances can only be finalised at the time of actually carrying out the works, or that need to be fluid in the sense of being able to respond to actual conditions at the time. That's why these matters are typically dealt with as part of environmental approvals, noting that Cleanaway is currently pursuing an amendment to its Environmental Protection Act licence for the site to accommodate the same works. And we've referred in the written submissions to the Tribunal's decision in the CETA case, which explains the reasons why these sorts of conditions are actually much better dealt with as part of the environmental approvals, which can be amended and updated over time rather than being fixed in a planning approval, particularly at a time when we're probably at least a couple of years away from those measures actually being carried out. I don't propose to say very much more. We've put out our position in those written materials. I think it sets out very clearly what the peer review report actually says in relation to these things, which is generally positive, particularly in relation to the stage 1 works. I don't think there's a single issue raised in the peer review about the stage 1 works. The only concerns that are raised are in relation to stage 2 and the same relation to this information I've just referred to. A couple of quick comments on the information presented by the DEAG. First, this letter from Dr. Leon Munro. I've heard him referred to this morning as an eminent tailings expert. We don't have a clue who this guy is. An online search turns up virtually nothing other than either him or NGO Chem Consulting other than a LinkedIn page. So we haven't seen the letter until it was published as part of the agenda for the meeting. Most of the letter is his comments on investigations that were carried out for a 2022 report, which has informed the design of the capping, but was addressing matters relating to what was condition 21 of the Environmental Protection Act licence. In the second last paragraph of the letter, Dr. Munro apparently quotes from page 13 of the ATC Williams report. If you go to page 13 of the ATC Williams report, that quote does not appear on that page. I've done a word search. I can't find it anywhere in the document at all, so we're not quite sure what's being referred to there. Further, the issue that's raised in that letter from Dr. Munro wasn't mentioned at all in the peer review by NBS Environmental of this application. So while he's expressed some concerns, the peer review that the Shire sought doesn't raise any of those things. So we say, therefore, very little, if any, weight should be given to that letter. The submission from the DAG to the DWER It's a small point. It's dated 7th of November 2025. That's clearly can't be right. It does seem to be quite recent. It refers to things that happened towards the end of January. But again, that letter and that submission had not been seen by Cleanaway until it was published as part of the agenda for this meeting. By its own admission, the content of that submission is jumbled and sometimes difficult to follow. We're obviously not going to go through all of the details that are in there, but the important point is that it's a submission that's been made to the DWER in relation to the application to amend the licence. It's not the submission that was made by the DEAG to the Shire in relation to the DA. To the extent that it raises issues that were raised in the submission to the Shire on the DA, those issues have been dealt with in the RAR and have been responded to in our written materials. To the extent it raises other things, and as mentioned, we haven't been able to go through it in detail. They are not issues that were raised by the DEAG in their submission in relation to the development application. They're not issues that were raised by the peer review, by MBS Environmental, and most importantly, they're issues that say they've been raised in a submission to the DWER, and if they have any credence at all, they'll be dealt with by the DWER as part of its determination of the application to amend the licence conditions. Turning to the alternative recommendations, can I say at the outset, Cleanaway is opposed to a deferral of the consideration of this application. As I mentioned earlier, the works will occur in 2 stages. Stage 1 is simply an earth cap to allow settlement of the tailings, and the planned completion of that cap is June of 2025, so just a few months away. And that's because it's important to have that work done during the summer months before rain comes. So a deferral, even for 60 days, will significantly impact on the ability to carry out the stage 1 works. Second reason is that MBS Environmental, the peer review, didn't identify any concerns in relation to the stage 1 works. The only things they raised about some information they thought should have been in there was in relation to the stage 2 works, or in fact the period post the stage 2 works in relation to the ongoing monitoring. Stage 1 works they had no concerns about at all. As to the specific further information that's referred to in the deferral, which the panel asked to be identified, the further information request in relation to dust management, again, simply not supported by the peer review. The peer review didn't ask for any further dust management. In fact, it said that the existing dust management plan was sufficient to deal with any dust measures during the construction of the capping. Additionally, even if that was required, that's something that can be dealt with by a condition of approval. Although we note it's not even included as a condition of approval in the alternative recommendation for approval, setting out the conditions. Condition 4 of that alternative recommendation is actually satisfied with the existing dust management plans. As to the leachate management and stormwater management, further information requested regarding stormwater management, and in part 1, I think relating to leachate management, which relate to the capacity of the leachate ponds. 2 things. Firstly, again, that's only mentioned in the peer review in respect to the post-stage 2 works, in terms of whether the leachate ponds are sufficient for the purpose of that period of time, so it's a long way away. The Shire actually knows the capacity of the leachate ponds because they were approved by the Shire when they were built as part of the construction of the Tronox cells. And the fact is that they do have sufficient capacity that's referred to in the request of further information. So at its highest, this again should be a condition of approval, requiring confirmation of this prior to the completion, perhaps the commencement of the stage 2 works. The same comments also apply to the further information that's listed in part 2 in respect of leachate management, which talks about further details of the monitoring regime post the completion of the capping. That again can be dealt with as a condition prior to commencement of the stage 2 works at the earliest. It's a post-works monitoring program, nothing that has to be done during the carrying out of the works itself. And even going back a step as to whether that information is even necessary, we again, so on the one hand, it's been suggested that that information needs to be given before we can decide how to deal with the application. But on the other hand, the alternative recommendation for approval doesn't even require it as a condition of approval. So instead, the conditions recommended for approval are satisfied with the existing leachate management and monitoring programs, which require them to continue. But as I said earlier, perhaps the easiest way to deal with that is that those things, particularly the ongoing monitoring for years down the track, they are things that are far better and more appropriately left to be dealt with as conditions of the terms of the Environmental Protection Act licence, where they can be amended and updated over time to accommodate what's actually happening on the site and best practice. So there's no need, we say, to defer consideration of the DA. As the alternative recommendation for approval, supports that. Commented on additional conditions to reflect some of the additional information that's been requested that could be dealt with as part of conditions of the approval. And the only other comment we wish to make in relation to conditions, conditions 2 and 4, both refer to specific dated versions of certain plans. The issue is that those plans can be amended or even replaced over time. So we say the conditions should either just refer generically to the plans or should include reference to the plans as amended or as replaced in some way. Probably best just refer to the nature of the plan. That will cover any replacement plans rather than referring to a specific 2021 or 2022 version of the plan. So those were my main and that probably covers most, if not all, of what we wanted to make the way of the presentation. Certainly looking at Andrew, Kylie, John, if there's anything else you wanted to add, I've got a few minutes left. Or
Have just under a minute left. So it'll need to be quick because you've had your 11 and I'm sure there'll be questions. So any other comments you want to make within the next minute or so? All right, we might, Mr. Skinner, we might deal with questions if that's okay.
Yep.
All right. Councillor Gardner, do you have any questions for the applicant team?
I do have a question or two for Mr. Skinner. Julius, you've mentioned that in the future the environmental licensing will there be some conditions made in that. You're comfortable with expecting the panel today to make a decision relying on a future decision by another government department?
Well, that happens whenever there's multiple approvals required for a particular development.
So what's the surety that we get today that the department or the EPA will put those future monitoring conditions on?
Well, it's their specific role to deal with environmental protection. And as the tribunal mentioned in the decision that I've referenced in our written material, the State Administrator has acknowledged that that is, in most instances, the appropriate body to be dealing with those detailed environmental conditions and requirements.
Okay, that doesn't really put a lot of weight, but don't get a lot of joy out of that. The other one, you mentioned the timing before winter to try and get things started. Do you think that's a good planning outcome to rush decisions just to satisfy seasonal conditions?
I don't think we're rushing this decision, with all due respect. It's gone through the normal process and it's up for being determined today.
So you've said a deferral is not a suitable option due to the upcoming winter upcoming?
Yes, and again, that's not an unusual situation. There are often developments that have time constraints upon when they wish to start. That informs when the application is made so that there's time for it to be determined and then time for it to be carried out. And that's what's happened in this case.
Okay, I'll bear that in mind when making my decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Do any other members have questions for the applicant? Jackie, do you have questions?
Yes, please, Presiding Member. I'm just interested in the conversation pre-lodgement of this application, as far as, because I assume it's a waste disposal facility. At some point it was going to be rehabilitated. Just interested in that lead-in conversation of the requirement for the application and between yourselves and the Shire.
I'm just wondering whether either John or even Kylie, one of the three of you, John, Andrew, Kylie, might be best placed to answer that. I can provide some information, but I might not have all of it.
Anyone have an answer for that question? Anyone online from the applicant team?
I did not understand that question, sorry.
I believe Jackie German was asking about the pre-lodgement conversations that have occurred in relation to this application.
I think in summary, we were unsure whether we actually needed a DA or not. We were actually assuming, based on the stage 1 landfill cap, that we did not require a DA, that we wouldn't require one here as well. And we asked the question, I believe, of Ashwin to just ensure clarity, so we weren't doing anything wrong, and we were told that yes, we would need a DA. So in which case we planned appropriately, and to Julius's point, we don't feel this was rushed in any way. It was planned accordingly.
Thank you, Jackie. Do you have any other questions of the team?
I just got to follow up, I guess, point one of the recommendation, and also the alternate recommendation is classifying the use as a waste disposal facility. Would it be more incidental to? I guess Kylie might be the one from a planning perspective.
It certainly would be, could be considered incidental to the original development approval for the site. However, as Andrew has mentioned, that the Shire required a development application. We also sought clarification on whether a GBRS Form 1 application would be required, and that was determined it wasn't. So Ashwin may be able to answer your question, because yes, we did consider it incidental.
All right, we will let Ashwin have a go at that when we get to the section of the agenda that deals with the local government offices. Jackie, do you have any other questions of the presenters?
Yeah, last one, sorry, Dale, thank you. Is just an update on where the Dwyer Works approval process is at.
Again, John, are you best to?
Yeah, so we believe they are somewhere within 2 to 4 weeks away. And then I should reference that we have approval now from Dwyer to actually apply a interim cover, which is common practice for all of the landfill, where we put a 1 metre clay cap progressively as we complete filling, and that is awaiting for the finished profile to be completed and allow the final capping stage, which is quite common, and we've got that approval from Dwyer, but we haven't progressed. So technically we could start, I'm assuming we can start filling now with that metre cover.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Presiding Member. Julius, given the comments by DPLH regarding this application, and they say it's incidental, did you exercise your mind as to whether it really is a Form 1 application? Certainly that was considered, because it's a little unusual to have an approval. Well, there clearly is a development approval for the construction of this cell originally. It seems a little strange to contemplate that approval doesn't include the final capping of the cell once it's complete and the rehabilitation of it. But I think certainly the position was put to the Shire as to wanting to make sure, look, is any further approval going to be required? The Shire very clearly had the position that they considered a further development application was necessary for the capping and the rehabilitation. I suppose the choice at that point was to either accept that and lodge the DA, or double down and say, no, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. But the reality is it would still effectively have needed the Shire approval, because even as part of, it was certainly the detail of the capping would not have been part, or wasn't part of the original application for the cell, because it wasn't known what that would be at that point in time. So even if it is treated as part of the original approval for the construction of the cell, it's not unusual. You'd expect that final capping would still need approval from the Shire. So one way or another, we're still going to need approval from the Shire. It made perfect sense to just lodge the application for development approval. Otherwise, we'd be down the track of seeking the approval from the Shire, perhaps running into a dead end and having the choice of then either proceeding without approval and facing prosecution, or at least having the DA in place. So this was the path of least resistance.
Okay, thank you. We heard the representative of the action group speaking about dust and the wind that occurs high winds that occur in those months, in next few months actually. Can the applicant manage those high winds, seeing as they're going to do those works over that period? So what sort of action can they put in place to prevent the dust being spread as suggested?
Well, there's probably a few answers there. First is that those winds occur every year from time to time, so it's not just happening this year. And works are carried out on the landfill site, including covering, which are not dissimilar to the works being proposed here, again, throughout the year. The site has a comprehensive dust management plan that's been approved by the Shire. That plan has also been acknowledged in the peer review by MBS Environmental as being sufficient to deal with any dust occurring during the construction of stage 1 of the capping. But the detailed information that was submitted with the application also contemplates that there will be a further and more specific dust management plan that's got to be produced by the contractors for this specific work and approved by the Shire. So it's certainly something, it's not impossible to manage. And there's existing dust management plans and proposed dust management plans as part of the application to deal with it.
The other thing that the presenter mentioned was the revegetation. And I'm not sure, but I couldn't see any plan or discussion around the revegetation of the site following the final capping.
I think John might be in a better place, but
yeah, there's a landscaping plan. Now that is currently under revision for a different with the Shire for the buffer zone, which has nothing to do with the rehabilitation of this cap. So that cap has been defined in that landscaping plan for some time now, years, and it's grasses.
Okay, thank you. No further
Anything else? I have a few questions, if that's okay. So, and they may be more relevant to the Cleanaway team, but I'll let you direct that. Okay. So the submission provided by the Dardanup Environmental Action Group suggests that the site isn't even ready for capping at the minute from a geotechnical point of view. Could you comment on that, please?
that is definitely one I'm going to handle.
The cell has been drying for circa 3 years, so over 3 summers, and you know the ADC Williams have given us a detailed design that takes into account settlement, the moisture content, the leachate that's coming out over time. That's been appropriately that's going to be appropriately managed. And then I refer to Jenny's concern around machinery tracking the contents, the waste contents outside of the cell. That's not actually how it's to be constructed. There's no machinery to be coming in contact with any of the waste. It's construction from the outside of the cell pushing clay in. So the machinery doesn't take, there's no people or machinery coming into contact with that waste stream at any time in any of this construction.
Okay. Second question, the action group in their submission recommend that you undertake a formal assessment of other options, including a 2-metre clay cap and total removal and relocation. Did you consider those options?
Somewhat. So total removal is defeating the purpose of having a purpose-built cell for this waste stream. Like it's engineered in the first place to accommodate the environmental risk around managing this waste stream. I would note that this is one of 2 cells, and the waste stream is, and where this waste stream is ceasing expected in July this year. So the customer has an alternative solution. I think we've made that aware certainly to the community reference group meeting that we hold. and so, you know, capping's a good thing for managing the environmental risk, and as Julius has pointed out, DWERA are the appropriate body to determine whether our design is managing that environmental risk appropriately.
Thank you, John. So question 3, the responsible authority report states that consideration needs to be given to the impacts of sodium chloride and calcium sulfate seeping into the environment over time. So that suggests to me that the issue wasn't adequately covered in the application and supporting documents. Is that correct, or could you comment on that, please?
Again, that is that would be a component of the DWERA assessment. So that is around groundwater monitoring, which we do groundwater monitoring. We have bores around the cell. We do testing on a 3-monthly basis. There's an annual report that's made public on our website. Yeah, I think that answers it.
Yep, thank you. There's also a stated concern about the capping system losing integrity over time. Could you comment on the likelihood and consequence of that risk, please, and what you have done to assess and what you would do to mitigate that risk?
I believe, Andrew, you might want to jump in here, but I believe that has also been covered in the ATC Williams design report that DWERA are assessing. Do I know how many years it is? No. Okay.
Last question from me, and Julius has already dealt with this to a degree. So there is an alternate on the table. Well, it's not on the table yet, but possibly for deferral. If the DAP were to go with that alternate today, we do hear your concerns about timing, but if we were to go that way, would you be able to pull together that extra info the Shire has asked for, and how long would you need to pull that together?
I don't know whether I'm speaking out of a term, but why? Like I don't get the relevance of what Shire are actually asking us for.
All of that information is available.
So
the information's available and it's sitting with DWERA under assessment.
Okay, so my question is, if this DAP was not comfortable approving it today, and perhaps they're not comfortable refusing it either, and they went with a deferral, so we're not sort of yet debating the relevance of it. My question to you is simple. If you were to be required to provide that info, do you have it easily accessible, and how quickly can you send it back into the Shire to allow the DAP to make a decision?
Specifically, what information are they requiring that's not already available though?
But bear in mind, we only saw this at 5 o'clock last night.
All right. So there was an alternate circulated yesterday, and Julius has it with him. There are a few extra bits of information that, Julius, you have it. Would you like to read out?
In relation to dust, it says a site-specific dust management plan demonstrating how dust will be managed from the site from dust-generating activities specifically associated with the decommissioning and capping of the waste cell. On the one hand, the MBS report says they were already satisfied with the existing one, so I'm not quite sure what else we can provide. The application itself contemplates a site-specific plan will be submitted, so there's no inherent possibility or difficulty in doing it. It's just that it's something that would, 99 cases out of 100, be dealt with by a condition of approval requiring that to be submitted.
Sure, sure. But you could end up today with the DAP moving and deciding a deferral, and the members in the meeting could decide 30, 60, 90 days. So I'm giving you the opportunity now, in the event the DAP moves a deferral, to tell me how quickly, given you have some time constraints, how quickly that could be returned to the Shire and the DAP.
Well, I'd expect, speaking looking to John and Andrew in particular, I would have thought this information could be put together very quickly. Certainly we need a lot less than 60 days. And I would imagine you would be putting this together within a matter of single-digit days. Is that
Andrew?
how long?
If I can add in, sorry, all the information is available. It's been circulated. The Shire have got our dust management plan. The only one we won't circulate immediately is when we engage our contractor, what their dust management plan is. In the submission to the DA, the ATC Williams document details specifically dust emissions, dust mitigation, and methods of control, and that'll be included in our contractors' environmental report. The leachate management, the 1% AEP, it's all detailed in our license conditions with DWER. The Shire has all this information available. DEAG has all this information available. And the stormwater management, the overtopping of the leachate ponds due to stormwater management, that's all part of that leachate question one in their conditions. It's all the information is already available to the Shire and DEAG. They have that information.
Thank you.
And short answer is probably that 14 days would be more than enough.
Thank you. All right. I think let's move on then to inviting questions of the local government officers. We've got Ashwin there. And Ashwin, do you have Gabriella Hayward with you today, or is it are you flying solo?
Thank you, Presiding Member. It's just myself to answer any questions.
All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the members if you have any questions for the Shire, and then I may at the end of that give Ashwin a couple of minutes just to respond generally to any issues that have been raised. Councillor Gardner, do you have any questions of the Shire officers?
Sorry, I've missed. I've got a few technical difficulties here. Were you asking me, Chair?
I'm asking you, Councillor Gardner, if you have any questions of the Shire officers. We've got Ashwin with us online.
Yep, thank you for that. Yeah, the signal seems to be dropping in a bit. Ashwin, the peer review has highlighted those couple of issues, the deficiencies with the application, and we have spoken probably about a potential deferral, including those environmental tests, those extra tests that we would like to have. What's your thoughts on that line, please?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor, and thank you, Presiding Member. It's definitely an interesting one. When the application came to the Shire and when we were speaking to Harley Dykstra, we looked at whether development application was required and quickly found out that there are works being proposed. And then we turned back to the existing approval in 2011 to find out whether those works were actually supported by a management plan of some sort. And to cover those works, the 2011 approval was silent on it. So immediately we requested a application planning approval for the works. And as soon as an application is submitted to us, we are required to assess the application against several matters in the planning framework. And one of the specific matters are associated with environmental impacts. And when an application in front of the local government, we need to understand that the development ultimately won't result in adverse environmental impacts. So through that process and through the peer review, which identified some gaps in the proposal, there was issues relating to potential environmental impacts, not understanding the capacity of the leachate management pond, not also understanding what are the actual dust generating activities. The application that was submitted to the Shire was 2 documents, was a Harley Dykstra planning report and 1 specification report. So I haven't seen anywhere in relation to specific dust management matters. So naturally, when we get an application in front of us, we need to assess it. And those 3 matters there, the Shire couldn't conclude there's enough information in front of us to conclude that the development will not result in adverse environmental impacts. So additional information in these areas would assist the Shire's merits-based assessment.
Could I just follow up before I hand back to Councillor Gardner for any other questions? So if I can just ask a follow-up question, Ashwin. If the decided to approve the application today, would the conditions that you've suggested requiring dust management plans, etc., specific to the site, address those concerns you have?
Thank you for the question. So in the Shire's haste yesterday to respond to the Regulation 13, the Shire responded as if an approval be based on existing plans, but ultimately, if it was to be approved today, an updated dust management plan, a leachate management plan, which shows the capacity of the existing leachate ponds, and an enhanced monitoring regime, will go to significant lengths to satisfy the Shire that the development won't result in environmental impacts.
So sorry, you mentioned an updated dust management plan and a leach management plan, and what else?
If we have understanding of the leachate management, so the capacity of the leachate ponds, also the enhanced monitoring, that then would remove the requirement for an stormwater management, updated stormwater management plan, because the concern was ultimately we don't know the capacity of the leachate pond. Subject to a big rain event in winter time, there's concerns that the leachate may flow into the stormwater management pond, which isn't lined, and ultimately that's the pathway into the environment.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Gardner, back to you. Do you have any further questions of Ashwin?
No further questions, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Jackie, any questions of the Shire officers?
I would like Ashwin, if he could, obviously as he said, his R13 response to the approval approach was rushed. I'm wondering if you could add some words to those conditions to satisfy yourself completely there, Ashwin.
Just bear with me, member. Let me just pop up the alternative. How did you want me to go through it, member? My apologies. How did you want me to just go through each one?
Just go through each condition, I think, and just make sure that you're satisfied with the responses you gave for each of those conditions.
So, condition 1, there'll be no change to condition 1. Condition 2, we would want something there to include an enhanced monitoring regime. So that would include the regime we proposed as part of the deferral, which looks at monitoring of up gradient and down gradient bores from the leachate pond for a period of 5 to 10 years post-closure of waste cell. Additionally, live water level monitoring during the winter months to automatically alarm or divert water towards additional leachate ponds.
So that's taking those rehabilitation and closure plans and landscape plans specifically then to address, and you'd have several dot points then.
That's correct, member.
Okay.
And then we talk to number 3, and we'll talk number 3 will be specifically in relation to, it's mentioned there's stormwater, but it'd be the leachate management, and it'd be updated plans showing the capacity of the leachate management ponds and demonstrating that they have an adequate freeboard to maintain water in a 1 in 100 year storm event.
Do it.
And
it's not working.
Carry on, Ashwin.
And the last one, the dust, would be a site-specific dust management plan in relation to the specific to the decommissioning of the waste cell.
Okay. Just give us a minute, if you don't mind, just for us to consider what that looks like.
Thank you.
So Ashwin, can I just check in with you then? And we don't have to have the wording absolutely correct because we're not even sure if it would go that way yet. And we have the minutes process to help us with that. If the DAP were inclined to approve this today, the conditions, not condition one, that's standard condition, but the conditions would require a site-specific dust management plan as per the wording for the deferral. Then condition two, works to be completed in accordance with the rehab and closure plan and landscaping plan. And then condition three, the leachate ponds could maintain adequate freeboard. So a information demonstrating that the leachate ponds would maintain adequate freeboard subject to those three sub points that were contained in the deferral. Monitoring of upgradient and downgradient bores, and
Yes, member.
and the stormwater management. So it's basically a hybrid of the things you've asked for in the deferral and the conditions you've placed on a potential approval. If we were to combine those into conditions of approval, would you be satisfied that that would cover off on the key issues that you still have concerns about?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, so what we had in front of us is the peer review which identified those gaps, and it's quite a complex application. And I am a planner, and I rely upon the independent review to understand what's being proposed. And the independent review ultimately identified several matters, and if we can capture that in an approval, that will align with what the independent review ultimately identified.
Thank you. Back to you. Any further questions? All right, Ashwin, we can get rid of that. Thank you very much. Ashwin, I have a few questions if you don't mind. So am I correct in reading that no specific objections were received from relevant government and service agencies, and that DBCA and DUA provided technical advice on the proposal? Is that correct?
I know for a fact, Presiding Member, there was one community submission. Let me just check the state government and departments. No object. That's correct. So there's no objection in front of us from any state government departments, and were ultimately advised that their responsibility in licensing the works in the future.
Okay, so just on that point, you voiced some concerns about the adequacy of the monitoring program, or the detail about that. If that were to be addressed by DUA during the licensing process and required as part of a condition of approval, would that address your concerns about monitoring?
Thank you. I'm no stranger to that dual approval process. That's that approval process with these two bodies associated with it. And I suppose what's in front of us is an application for planning approval, and the Shire can't hand on its heart recommend an approval because it doesn't have the required information. But if there was information that were required in terms of the elevated monitoring regime presented to us as part of a condition of approval, ideally would have loved it as part of our merits-based assessment. But if we can capture it through a condition of approval, that would satisfy the Shire's concerns. But I am motivated to see that as part of this approval.
Thank you, Ashwin. Are there any other questions of the Shire officers? No, Ashwin, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just in case there's something we've not picked up by a question, and if there's anything you'd like to add before we move to making a decision on this.
I don't really have anything else to say, Presiding Member, except the responsible authority's position is as per the RAR, and I've always taken the approach, despite there is another approval by DWER, that we have all the information in front of us because we are tasked to undertake a merits-based assessment. And as part of our merits-based assessment, despite that DWER are also approving it as part of their process, we are required to ensure that the development doesn't impact. We have to consider several matters in the planning framework. one of the key considerations here is ultimately understanding the impacts of development upon the environment. Where there is a potential pathway into the environment, understanding that the broader locality utilises the groundwater, the broader locality is really sensitive to environmental issues. The Shire has to have all the information in front of us to fully understand the application. The peer review which was prepared ultimately identified some gaps, and we've identified that through the RA, and the Shire will have some comfort knowing that updated plans will be submitted either through a deferral or we can capture it some other way to ensure that the environment will be protected as part of this development and in perpetuity. This development is, this ultimately will go on for 50 years. I think monitoring maybe a bit longer. So we are just conscious to making it right now as part of our merits-based assessment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've heard now from the applicants and from the Shire officers. So I think it's time then to move to the report. And just for clarity, we are now dealing with the report in the agenda which recommends refusal of the application. Can I seek a mover and seconder for the recommendation in the responsible authority report? Would anyone like to move the recommendation for refusal? Are you moving, Councillor Gardner? Sorry, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation there that we refuse the application.
Thank you. I will hand back to you in a minute as mover. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation in the responsible authority report? No? All right. Then the recommendation for refusal is lost. And on that basis, we will need to move to an alternate recommendation. Does any panel member wish to move an alternate recommendation? Otherwise, I will. Councillor Gardner, you have your hand up. Would you like to move anything?
Well, thanks, Chair. I'm happy if you've got an alternative. I'm happy for you to go first.
Sorry, say again.
I'm happy for you to, if you have an alternative motion that you're prepared to move, I'm happy to wait that one out.
All right. Look, then as presiding member, I am happy to move a motion to approve the application, subject to conditions which we do not have word perfect at the minute, but they would be resolved through combining the reasons for deferral and the conditions that the Shire has already suggested, and those would be captured in the draft minutes and circulated to everybody for wordsmithing before finalised. And we have already briefly discussed them. So I would move that recommendation for approval on that basis. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Clayton. I will speak very briefly then to move to that alternate motion. From a land use planning perspective, the development is consistent with and incidental to the existing use in my view. It complies with the relevant provisions of the scheme, complies with the height and setback requirements set out in the local development plan applicable to the site. The key issue, I believe, for consideration is whether the proposal meets the environmental management provisions of the local development plan, specifically whether the proposal demonstrates consistency with any environmental approvals for the site, and whether the proposal is supported by relevant technical and management plans. And some examples of these types of plans are listed in the local development plan itself. In reviewing the documentation provided to the DAP for this proposal, I'm of the view the documentation has either been provided or it will be dealt with as part of DEWA's licensing process, which is a comprehensive process, and their review process, given it is the environmental process, would be more extensive than a planning process would be, or it could be appropriately conditioned as part of approval of this DA. Therefore, it's my view that the DAP would be able to approve this DA today, subject to the conditions that we have briefly talked about. The Responsible Authority report does set out some environmental risks identified through the peer review of the technical submission that formed part of the DA documentation. There are acknowledges that some of the risks identified have been adequately addressed, but does raise specific concerns about the impacts of sodium chloride and calcium sulfate seeping into the environment over time, the possibility of the capping system losing integrity in the future, the adequacy of storage capacity in existing stormwater and leachate ponds, and the adequacy of the proposed post-closure monitoring program. I am comfortable that these issues have either been dealt with or will be dealt with as part of conditions of approval or a separate state government process. So very briefly, just recapping, I think the conditions, if this is carried, would deal with a site-specific dust management plan, a rehabilitation and closure plan and landscaping plan, extra information on the leachate ponds, and a monitoring regime and stormwater management measures. So on that basis, given those plans would come forward for the Shire's assessment, as part of clearance of these conditions, I'm happy to move with approving the application today. Clayton, as seconder, would you like to speak to the?
Yes, thank you. Look, I wholeheartedly agree with the comments you have made. I acknowledge the officers' concerns and their desire in doing a merits-based assessment, their desire to see all the material before they make a positive recommendation. But it's not unusual in these situations to have conditions related to management plans, and that's simply all we're doing here. I note, having read all the material, that there are many of those plans available now, but they do need to be updated to be more site specific. So, and that's what we're doing through this recommendation. So I'm happy to support the hybrid recommendation.
Thank you. Would any other member like to speak for or against the motion for approval? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. Look, just a question first. So those dot points that were listed in the alternative motion that came through yesterday are added to the motion now for those plans to come to Shire. That's the plan?
Yes, so my understanding is there were two alternate recommendations for yesterday for our consideration. One was for deferral so that the applicant could provide extra information. One was for approval subject to some conditions. What this motion is proposing is the requirements of both those, because neither one captured all of them, are combined so that there's fairly substantial information that needs to come forward for the Shire's approval as part of the condition clearing process.
Yep. No, that's my understanding as well. Thank you for that. I will speak against briefly, if I may. And it's as I say, it is a hybrid model. My preference would be for a deferral, so that that paperwork can be presented to the panel to make the decision. We're now relying on Shire staff to okay those plans that will come forward. They may not still be satisfactory, and we'll be back down that path again where someone at a higher authority, perhaps a DAP panel, has to make that decision. So I will be voting against the hybrid model as it sits and foreshadow an alternative motion to defer for 60 days with the presentation of those other plans that have been mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor. Jackie, would you like to speak for or against the motion for approval on the table before us?
Yep, I'd be speaking for the motion that's in front of us at the moment to approve the application subject to wordsmithing some conditions. I too agree that it is an incidental use to the approved current activities on the site, and I feel that the issues that have been raised can be managed through the development approval process, with the finer details being managed through the DWER process, particularly things like freeboard, which is a standard sort of condition on the DWER licenses for these types of facilities. So I'm comfortable that any sort of environmental impacts that are raised and acknowledge those can be managed through the conditions that we impose today.
Thank you, Jackie. We now revert to myself to close as mover. I don't have much extra to say other than to perhaps address the concern raised by Councillor Gardner about the Shire finding themselves in a position having to make a call on clearance of conditions. Admittedly, some of these documents are complex documents, but I do believe that most of them have already been viewed and reviewed by the Shire, and it's not uncommon that it does fall to the Shire to review documents as part of any clearance of conditions on any development approval. If the Shire needs assistance with that from their consultants, that is who would be most appropriate to assist them in that regard. So I think that that is not uncommon. I have nothing further to add. So if we can then put the recommendation for approval subject to those conditions, which we'll wordsmith through the minute process, to a vote by a show of hands. All those in favour? That's carried 3-1. Thank you. Moving then to item 4, Form 2 DAP applications. We don't have any on this agenda for Dardanup today. Item 5, Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. There are nil. With that, I'd like to thank Councillor Gardner from the Shire of Dardanup for your attendance and participation. Enjoy the rest of your day, Councillor. Hello, everyone. So moving then to part C of the agenda, the City of Busselton. For this part of the agenda, I'd like to welcome Councillor Anne Ryan and Councillor Kate Cox, our local government DAP members from the City of Busselton and the city officers that we have with us today. Item 1, declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all documentation contained within part C of the agenda and the related info that was uploaded to the DAP website. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all the information? Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this item? And as part of that, could I check with our local government members whether this application has been before you at a council meeting or briefing? It has not. Excellent, thank you. Do any members wish to declare any interest in relation to this item? Nil. Thank you very much. Moving then on to the item itself. Item 3.1, Geograph Bay Road, Broadwater Caravan Park, 8 chalets, office check-in and car parking, DAP number 24/02772. We have one presenter on this today, Mark Halsall, who is speaking in support of the recommendation in the report. Mark, I remind you that in accordance with clause 4A2 of the DAP Standing Orders 2024, the presentation is limited to 3 minutes. We've read the submissions as part of the application, so I encourage you to focus on the main issues you'd like to get through in 3 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you to all the DAP members. As you've said, my name is Mark Halsall. I'm here with Reece Johnson, who's a representative of the family that owns Mandalay Holiday Resort and Tourist Park. Obviously, thanking you for the opportunity to speak. This relates obviously to the demolition of existing chalets and replacement with new chalets, generally in the same location across the frontage of the site. New check-in building, parking and check-in bay roadworks as per submitted in the plans. Mandalay Resort and Tourist Park was established in 1964 and has been voted one of the best holiday resorts in Australia. The park's been family owned and operated by the Johnson family for over 60 years. and this provides some of the best tourist park accommodation in the state, particularly with the standard of accommodation that's provided, and also the other facilities on site. And as we've done a lot of work for caravan parks around the state, it certainly is held up as one of the primary examples of how you do a great job with the caravan park. The proposal intends to effectively make marked improvements with the facilities, just bringing in contemporary facilities and upgraded accommodation. We've had really good consultation with the City of Busselton planners through the assessment process, and we're generally happy with the recommendations. A key feature of the park is the access road to it, which only services the park itself. It's surrounded on either side by a managed reserve, which provides a very scenic, grassed, landscaped entry and presents a very attractive frontage to the park and the area generally. And this has been managed by the park for 60 years. In the negotiations and reflected in the conditions is the ongoing maintenance of this area by Mandalay. So it's basically putting in place an agreement that formalises what's been happening for 60 years in any case. Other minor adjustments to plans have been made to address any queries that have been raised by the planners and other officers of the city. And it should be recognised that this park is one of the 30 strategic tourism sites identified in the city, and specifically in the local planning strategy, promotion of improvements to parks such as this is a key feature of the strategic planning for Busselton. So this represents exactly what the city is looking for. It's a significant investment, and as stated, we're generally comfortable with the conditions offered and the recommendations of the Shire planners, city planners. Be happy to take it.
Mark, we will move to questions of the presenter. Councillor Ryan, do you have any questions of the presenter?
I do. I was interested to read the report and see that there were no submissions from surrounding landholders with any objections or no issues whatsoever. Did you guys go out and did you talk to the neighbours or?
Nope.
Congratulations.
we know all of them really well, so it didn't really be a drama, but no, we didn't. So
I think it's indicative that you're doing a good job and, you're a good corporate citizen. So I thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that, Anne.
Any other questions, Councillor Ryan?
No.
Councillor Cox, any questions from you?
I just have one small question. I believe that I did read in the report that there wasn't going to be the additional removal of any trees or remnant vegetation in this new development or additional development.
I think there's two. I think there's two peppermint trees that need to be removed to fit all of the chalets and that in. So we've had those.
Fully assessed.
Yeah, fully assessed, yeah.
Yeah, we had an environmental assessment of the development's been designed to avoid peppermint trees in every way we can, and that resulted in an environmental assessment that proved that we could limit it to only 2 trees, recognising that most of them were planted by the park anyway. And so, environmentally, that's why I think the officers have agreed that it's a good outcome. And there's a condition, a couple of conditions there relevant to that, protecting those trees and also making sure that any construction around it maintains the integrity of those.
Great, thank you. Yes, it is. I would agree with Councillor. It's one of our premium holiday destination accommodation places down here. So, I commend you on the application.
Thank you. Jackie, do you have any questions of the presenter? No? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Just one. Just in relation to the public art, I was interested in certainly the normal condition about providing public art, and then the advice note saying that you might want to, at your volition, discount the public art requirement by what you've already done. So what sort of discussions and how would that unfold with the Shire, the city?
Well, obviously we've had the discussion with the city about the fact that the park already has some significant art contribution, and that's been something that typically this is redevelopment, so we're replacing old with new and making improvements in respect to the check-in facilities, which whilst is an expensive exercise, there was consideration given to, if there's already been public art provided for the development that we're replacing, should that be taken into account? And that seems to have been acknowledged by the planners through this advice note, and we're expecting that that'll be factored in to what ultimately is required in respect of public art.
So you're quite, I mean, just by a comment that advice note means nothing really, because it's only the conditions that are hard and fast. So you're quite comfortable that through a side process, you'd be able to adjust the requirement of condition 4.5.
I guess we're hopeful.
I guess, you know, we've been trying to work really closely with the city officers to achieve the best outcome we can, and we obviously are putting in some faith in the process that we'll be able to negotiate that out. So yeah, I mean, it is something that crops up with a lot of our clients. Actually, this 1% for art is a very expensive item, and especially when you've already made a significant contribution already. So yeah, to answer your question, we have put faith in negotiation with the officers, but obviously if the condition wasn't worded, was worded to include that, it would be even better, but we haven't forced that issue or asked for that through this process.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you. We might move to inviting any questions of the local government officers. I believe we have Andrew Watts and Bethany Baker with us from the City of Busselton today. Are there any questions any member would like to ask the city officers? Councillor Ryan, any questions for the officers?
I don't have a question of the city officers. I do. Can I respond to the percent for art issue? Is that possible?
During debate, Councillor.
Okay.
Let's stick to the questions at the
Sure.
minute, and you can certainly contribute during that. Councillor Cox, any questions of the city officers at this point? No. Jackie, any questions? Okay.
Would the officers be happy if advice note 14 was tacked on to condition 4.5?
Officers wouldn't, as such, have any particular objection to that. The initial thought was we put it as an advice note, noting that yes, we have had discussions with the applicant in regards to requirement or not requirement for 4% for art. We don't have the full details of what artworks have been recently undertaken on site at the own volition of the landowners. We weren't, and as such, we weren't prepared to completely remove the percent for art condition and put the advice note instead, kind of giving the option to negotiate how that condition would be satisfied. Whether or not by putting it in the condition that would be enforceable enough should the details of what artworks have actually been undertaken not actually be entirely consistent with our policy, that would probably be where city officers might have concern. But if the DAP members are satisfied that it is appropriate to include the advice note within the condition, city officers wouldn't necessarily have a fundamental objection to that.
Good.
Thank you. Andrew, just as a follow-up then, is it standard practice to require public art contributions for replacement of facilities? So versus a completely new development, if you are upgrading or replacing facilities, do you think it is standard practice to require that contribution? Or could you comment on whether or not you think it's a disincentive to upgrade of facilities if applicants have to pay that contribution?
Arguably, maybe you could say it is a disincentive for upgrading of facilities, and I guess maybe therefore there could be some consideration of the extent that percent for art in this instance is necessary to more deal with the level of additional development or upscaling in the level of development, in that whilst they're removing existing chalets and replacing them with more chalets, they are replacing the admin type facilities that are elsewhere on the site and replacing them with new admin facilities. Some of that is allowing for other parts of the park to be used in different ways to what they might be being used now. And so arguably you could go that that's somewhat of an upgrade and an addition as well. We weren't comfortable with completely removing the condition, but are happy to flexibly negotiate with the applicant of how that condition is satisfied.
Thank you for that.
Just in relation to advice note 10, and I accept it's only an advice note, but I was intrigued by the wording there. The lighting plan shall deal with sensible timed management. What is sensible timed management?
I think that more relates to the hours that lighting would be utilised, noting that there would always need to be some lighting of the park and the facilities to ensure some safety of the patrons, but making sure that the lighting is not going to unduly impact upon adjoining landowners when typically at night, when you typically be wanting it to be dark and not having any light pollution. And I guess the sensible is probably more is kind of noting what is practical.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Just as a follow-up on that question, does timed management, in your view, could mean two things from my perspective? It could be that those lights are on automatic timers, or that the lighting plan actually talks about when those lights would be switched off at night. Is there any view on what timed management means?
Well, it could be when they're switched off. It could also be requirement for at certain hours, maybe they need to be dimmed. That's probably, once again, something that the detail of what is reasonable and what is reasonable to satisfy the condition can be worked through and negotiated between the applicants and the city.
Thank you. Any other questions of the local government officers? No. All right, let's move to the report then for the item, noting that we are dealing with a responsible authority report that recommends approval of the proposal subject to conditions. Can I seek a mover for the recommendation in the responsible authority report? Anyone wish to move? Thank you. Moved, Councillor Ryan. Seconder? Seconded, Councillor Cox. Councillor Ryan, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would, and thank you to the proponent for this development. It's to be commended. I also agree that the percent for art is onerous, and I have raised, I think Councillor Cox will agree, that I've raised it in discussions to be reviewed. it's an onerous imposition, I believe, especially in light of the fact that the community in general can't necessarily see this artwork. It's my intention to have the review of the policy so that a percent for art is put into a pot, if you like, so that the community art can be seen by all. Typical, I don't know whether you've been to Canberra, but there's lots of artwork around Canberra that is there for everyone to see. I think that the suggestion of having it as an advice note would be more in keeping with what is required or can be achieved. And I think that an advice note with these particular proponents, as I said before, being good corporate citizens is probably something more palatable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Could I just query with you, are you suggesting that you would like to move an amendment to deal with the issue?
Happy to do that. If I can ask.
Like that to look like?
Well, basically that it is an advice note, that the percent for art is not a condition, but simply an advice note.
Okay, so you were suggesting that condition 4.5 be deleted and combined with advice note 14 to become simply an advice note.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cox, do you second that amendment as seconder? Yes. No. All right. Councillor Cox, would you like to talk to that amendment? We'll revert back to the primary motion in a second. Would you like to talk to that amendment?
Look, I concur with Councillor Ryan on, in this particular instance, as it is a redevelopment as opposed to really a new development. If it was a whole new development and they were building a whole new caravan park development, then I would be more inclined to impose the 1% for art as a condition. I think as they're replacing existing ageing chalets and just upgrading their facility, I would agree that the percentage for art should simply be an advice note as opposed to a condition. I believe that the investment that they have already contributed to this site has been significant. And so, yes, in this case, I think as it's already, I think we need to review, perhaps the city needs to review in terms of when percentage for art is relevant for redevelopment as opposed to new development.
Thank you.
So that's why I'll be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other panel member wish to speak to this amendment?
Thank you. And look, I agree with what the two councillors are saying, but my approach would be to completely delete the condition and the advice note, because even if it went across as an advice note, it's sort of worded in a way it says this entails compliance with the percent for art. So I think that it's going to be confusing.
Yeah.
And I think it's clearer to say, let's just get rid of it.
Okay, happy to do so.
So,
Councillor Ryan, I might then go back to you as the member who moved the amendment. Are you happy to alter your amendment to completely delete condition 4.5 and advice note 14 for the reasons that you've already discussed?
Happy to do so.
Councillor Cox, a seconder, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
All right. Does any other member wish to speak to that? Jackie?
Advice notes 12 and 13 also relate to the public art. So I would suggest including deletion of those if we're deleting all references to the public art requirements.
Happy to support that.
Happy, Councillor Cox? Okay. Thanks for that, Jackie. Yes, I will support this amendment as well. I think it is a little bit tricky when we start requiring public art contributions for upgrades. I have seen it elsewhere where it actually proves the disincentive and then is not ideal from anyone's perspective. So I will certainly support an amendment to delete condition 4.5 and advice note 12, 13 and 14 in this instance. Councillor Ryan, as mover of the amendment, do you want to say anything further in relation to the amendment?
No, I think it's all been said. Thank you.
All right, let's vote on that amendment then. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Ryan, reverting back to you then as mover of the primary motion, anything you wish to add?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cox, the seconder of the primary motion, would you like to speak to it?
No, thank you. I think everything's been said. Thanks.
Jackie, would you like to talk to the primary motion for approval?
Yeah, I'm supportive of the approval. I think it's great that the operators of these types of tourism ventures are continually upgrading their facilities and keeping up with what is expected from the current customer or modern customer. And supportive of the deletion of the public arts so that you not have a disincentive for this type of activity to occur.
Clayton, would you like to talk?
Yes, I'm more than happy to support this. It's great to see developments like this. It's an impressive proposal, and I acknowledge the local councillors and their comments about the operator. I just wanted to, with advice note 10, I just want to make it a bit clearer, and I suppose I'm suggesting that we take the word sensible out and put appropriate. And after appropriate timed management of lighting, in regard to the security needs and any potential amenity issues to be put in there, so it's clearer around what is meant by that advice note.
You moving that as an amendment?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Wish to speak further on that amendment? Councillor Ryan, do you wish to speak to that amendment?
No, I think it's self-explanatory.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak to that amendment? No? Could I then seek by show of hands all those in favour of that amendment? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Anything else you wish to add? All right, I might briefly add some commentary. I think that what's being proposed is an excellent upgrade for this park. I think particularly the pullover check-in bays for caravans and campers. This always reduces congestion and increases safety for users of the park. There are other parks that I have been familiar with where this is not provided and it actually becomes quite messy. So well done for suggesting that and investing in that safety measure. The proposed changes have no negative impact on the surrounding area, and I think they only serve to enhance the amenity of the site and the development as viewed from the street and the beachfront. No public submissions were received, as noted by the local government councillors. That is unusual for many local governments, and so well done. DECA didn't raise any issues of significance, and the issues raised by DFIS initially have been responded to by an updated bushfire management plan. Also, pleasingly, the applicant made changes to address the AHD requirements of the city's charm map for the area, even though the charm map is not a statutory document or requirement at this stage. So again, a little bit more of that good corporate citizen coming through there. So well done. So happy to support on that basis. Councillor Ryan, as mover of the overall recommendation, would you like to close?
No, I don't have anything further to say, but I think well done on the development. I wish there were more like this and less contentious issues for council and the DAP panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. All right, let us deal with that primary motion then as amended by the two amendments that we've dealt with. Let's put the recommendation to a vote by show of hands. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 4, Form 2 DAP applications. There are none. Item 5, Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. Part D, other business. Item 1, SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals. There are a list of SAT applications for the DAP listed on the DAP website for anyone. interested. Item 2, I declare the meeting closed at 11:07 a.m. and thank everyone for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.